Hey everyone, welcome back to our color work hat workshop class, and we hope you're having fun. We are at, this is class number 4, I think, and you should be at the end of round 12 on your pattern. Okay, so your hat should look something like this. Don't stress if it doesn't look perfect. It might be your first color work hat, and it's a learning process. So be graceful with yourself and just enjoy it. Like I said on the previous class, you want to make sure that your knitting has some flex to it, so that you're knitting, carrying your colors loosely enough. If you've got a little bit of movement in your hat, things aren't too stiff, too tight. So like I say, this is the end of round 12. And what I'm going to get you to do in this next section of time, here we are here, end of round 12, and then we've got from rounds 13 all the way up to 44 before we start the decreasing at the top of our hat. So I'm going to give you a week, yes, a full week. We'll come back 1 week tonight, so Wednesday night next week, and we will tackle the decreasing together. But I thought I'd give you a nice chunk of time so you don't have to stress and rush. You've got a whole bunch of time before we come back and proceed on to chart number 2, which is your decreasing. So really just carrying on, it's just more of the same, except on round 14 we're going to start to introduce our 5th color of our project. We've used 4 up to now, and then we're going to be adding that last color in there, the color D, I should say. And yeah, so for example, our next round 13, is going to be our color A all the way around, okay? And then round 14 would be 2 stitches of D, 2 stitches of A, 2 stitches of D, 2A. And then on your next round 15 would be 1A, 2D, 1A, 1A, 2D, 1A, 1A, which is actually, as you can see, once you get into it, is actually 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 all the way around until you have 1 stitch left, and you would end with your 1 stitch of color A, and so on. Okay, this is going to give us this was what I was calling the branch pattern. So you're going to carry on all the way from round 13 all the way up to round 44, connecting in your colors as you need them. Like I say, if you're going for more than, say, 3 or 4 rounds without using a color, break it off, leaving a 6-inch tail or so, and come back to it, bring it back in later. But you don't have to bother dragging it all the way up with you when you don't need it. For example, for like this color here, color C, we don't need it now for 9 rounds. So we're not going to bother carrying that up with us. We'll drop it and reattach it later, okay? So carry on in this next week up to round 44, okay? I know it's a lot of many rounds, but I think you can do it. And you've got a full week to work on it. And like I say, if you pop in, have any questions, come on, see us at the shop. And I just wanted to show you where I'm at with my hat. So here we are here. I'm at my join. And as you can see, like I said in the previous class, sometimes at your join you have a couple of slightly looser stitches where your connections are happening. If you've got a little hole there, don't worry about it. We can go back in later, tidy it up. Again, if you want, you don't have to, but if you want, you can take some of your short ends, your 6-inch ends, tie them loosely together just so that they're sort of, a little bit more stable maybe. And but you don't have to. You can just literally keep going, and you can deal with all the little ends later. Okay, so one thing too I wanted to mention in this one, you probably noticed in the last class, I hold both my working yarns at the right side of my work. Okay, sorry, I can see if I can grab them here. I don't, some people do both yarns in their left hand, do it continental. Some people do one color in one hand and one in the other, which is called stranded. I've tried that. It doesn't work for me. It's not my favorite thing. So I always go back to having both my yarns on the right side of my work. And I'm what's called a thrower, which means I literally, I wrap by hand. I let go of my needle with my right hand anyways, and I wrap like this. And I do that when I'm knitting normally, and I do that with color work. I just find, for whatever reason, that is my favorite way. If you want to look up how to do stranded, there are some great YouTube videos. If you just look up on YouTube stranded color work, if you want to try holding one in one hand, one in the other. But it really, for color work, I find whatever works for you is great. If like I say, if that works for you, go for it. If just knitting normally, like you normally do with your right hand, if that works, go for it. Whatever you have to do really to get and maintain a nice tension, I think, is the bottom line. I find for me, when I try and do stranded, my tension sort of goes to pot, and I'm just not comfortable doing it. It's not my thing. So I just find that this really works for me, doing it the way I do it. One thing I wanted to mention too, in this pattern is such that you're never carrying one color or the other more than 3 stitches, so we aren't having to twist our colors together to hold them, because we're not worrying about going more than 3 stitches at a time. If you were drawing a color up from down below and it looked like it was coming up, more than 3 rows or 4 rows, and you felt like there was a little bit of a loop, I did it once here where I brought up my color A, and it was slightly longer float than it would be normally. It was maybe 4 stitches worth. If you want to catch that so that it's not as loopy, you would literally just take the color, you're working with, and you would literally twist it over the color that you are wanting to catch it to. Okay, so you would say I wanted to knit a stitch of aqua now, but I wanted to catch that stitch so that that float, so it wasn't as loose. I would just take it and literally twist it around the previous color I had in my hand, which then catches it at the back of my work, so it's not as big a loop. It sort of catches it, holds it in. That's how you catch a float, is by taking the color that is the float and putting it over or under, doesn't matter, over or under the other working color by twisting them together just once, and that catches that color in behind by pulling it under the other color. Okay, so like I say, on this hat we're not doing that really, because we're never carrying more than 2 or 3 stitches at a time at most. Okay, and in another video, probably at the end of this series of videos, I'm going to show you something that I've started doing, a really neat, tricky way of how to catch the floats differently. If I'm doing a hat where I've got longer floats, if I've got a 5, 6, 7, 8 stitch gap between one color and the next, in the old days I would catch the floats like I just described all the way along by twisting together. But I've actually found an even better way, an easier way, but that is for another video, because it doesn't really apply on this hat, because we're not needing it. So therefore you are ready to keep going. So like I say, carry on with rounds 13 to 44, and we will see you next Wednesday night, same time, and we will tackle the chart number 2, second chart, and the decreasing at the top of our hat. So I think that's all I wanted to tell you tonight. I think that's it. I hope you have a great week. Like I say, email if you have questions. Oh, I know, last thing, I was just going to talk about gauge and tension a little bit. By this point on your hat, you've got enough knitted that you probably, if you wanted, you could measure and check your gauge, see how you're doing in relation to what the pattern called for. I think the pattern, let me just double check. The pattern, we were talking at the beginning about the gauge being 29 stitches to 4 inches. So technically there would be, if I counted every stitch across within a 4-inch gap, there should be about 29 stitches, okay? Like I say, because this is a tester hat in a way for you, and maybe you've never done color work before, if you're close to that, don't worry. Even if you're not close to that, don't worry. This hat will fit somebody, don't worry. But I was just chatting with a customer today about gauge in color work, and after getting one hat done, you know, you might realize that, hey, my tension's perfect, the needle size was perfect for me. Maybe on the next one, maybe you'll want to go down 1 needle size and do the hat itself on a 3mm needle. You never know, but it's worth you know, calling this a practice hat and seeing what sort of a color knitter you are. You know, if you're fairly decently loose color knitter, or maybe you're a tighter color knitter. Maybe you'd have to go up a needle size because you're on the tighter side. But like I say, an average sort of ballpark would be 28, 29 stitches across 4 inches. But like I say, if you're out by a couple on this hat, don't worry too much. Oftentimes when you're doing a color work sweater, they'll actually, the pattern designer will say, you know what, why don't you do a hat as your swatch for this sweater so that you can see what your gauge is like with a particular yarn or particular needles, because hats are a great way to find out what your gauge is like for color work. Okay, so have a great week. We will see you back next Wednesday night, same time, and happy knitting.